Good evening, all. I'm John Heginbotham. I am your host tonight for Hop to Broadway. I am the director of the Dartmouth Dance Ensemble, a lecturer in the Department of Theater here at Dartmouth, and the choreographer of the recent revival of Oklahoma. And I just want to say before we start, the CDC has recommended that whenever one touches a surface that may be contaminated with COVID-19, that you wash your hands briskly for 20 seconds. People have decided that there are pieces of music which correspond to these 20 seconds. Happy Birthday, Twice in a Row, Frere Jacques, or 525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? All right, thank you. Ooh, okay, transferring. Welcome again. I'm now at my kitchen table, drying off. Everything's green here. It's all about the big green. So listen, I'm very excited to start to focus on our guest for tonight, Jim Nicola, who is the artistic director of New York Theater Workshop. New York Theater Workshop has a robust, wonderful relationship with Dartmouth College. They have had a residency here every summer for the past 29 years. And before I bring Jim into the room, I would love to show a video about the very recent 40th anniversary of New York Theater Workshop. Todd, go ahead with the video, please.
Is it 40? That's crazy.
The workshop has 4 decades of commitment to experimentation, to taking huge risks.
40 years feels like 10 seconds.
We have an enormous community of artists, and they've been part of our family for the last 40 years.
Have I really done 40 of these videos? 40 years in, we're still doing difficult work that is somewhat challenging.
Sustaining a conversation for the last 4 decades.
Not to get all nostalgic, but I have so many memories in these halls of different times in my life.
It's rare to be in a building with that much spiritual cohesion, and it's deep. You feel it. You feel it in the work.
My first job directing in New York was at the New York Theater Workshop, 70 Scenes of Halloween.
When Linda called and asked if I would be a usual suspect, I was definitely expecting someone to teach me like a secret handshake or something.
They gave me the rehearsal space upstairs. It was an extraordinary day and an extraordinary experience to be empowered as a young actor, to say my ideas are important and important enough to be given space at New York Theater Workshop.
That time in the rehearsal room, I think, is what stands out to me the most when we were developing Peter and the Starcatcher. That and sharing a dressing room with like 14 boys.
The first reading ever of the full script of Millennium Approaches was at New York Theater Workshop.
We look back and reminisce about the New York Theater Workshop days and often celebrate moments that are really communal and really collaborative. And we literally say, this is just like it was when we were at New York Theater Workshop at 2 a.m. working in that kitchen.
New York Theater Workshop basically came and saved our butts. It was a hugely productive time for us when we were in residence here.
When someone has the faith in you, you sort of rise to the occasion and you do the thing you didn't think you could do.
I was a part of the first Mind the Gap. I began to understand what arts did and was responsible for in society.
2050 was an environment where I could be all right just coming as I am and being me.
We did the Dartmouth residency. We had 2 weeks up there with some beautiful artists. I have some very deep, fond memories of that time.
I'll never forget being at a Dartmouth retreat when this gangly, dark-haired composer plunked out on an electronic keyboard and a tape recorder songs from what he called a rock and roll adaptation of La Boheme. And that was Jonathan Larson, and the first time I heard Rent.
Everything that I have worked on that's come out of this place has been rich and complicated and valued and recognized. It's dramaturgy first, storytelling first, and the resources are put in the right place.
Getting to come downtown instead of going to Midtown to rehearse was always just like, oh yeah, this is like where we make the good theater.
Carol Churchill's A Number.
Little Foxes, Eva Van Hove's piece.
Lighty Breeze. Love and Information.
They are these beautiful little jewels of productions, like Once.
I remember seeing Vienna Lusthaus and thinking this would be a perfect show if it snowed, and then it snowed, and I wept.
Claudia Schiffer, just because she was so unexpected, blown sideways through life.
New York Theater Workshop is one of our premier institutions that is making cutting-edge work.
They've done work that other people wouldn't touch. Jim will take chances on work that people have slammed. I want to do this.
As I come back in different phases of my own career, I feel like, am I risky enough for New York Theater Workshop? That's an extraordinary quality to have as a theater.
As long as you're willing to take journeys into arenas that are uncomfortable and that upend the status quo, only then can you grow.
The community comes here to be sustained, to be nurtured, to find solace, to find joy, to find challenge. It's a workshop for the human being, a workshop for seeing and apprehending the world in a deeper and richer, more thoughtful way.
So fantastic. A lot of very inspiring work over the years from this company and from its artistic director. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the artistic director of the Tony-winning off-Broadway theater organization, New York Theater Workshop, and this is Jim Nicola.
Hi there. It's a pleasure to be here in my second home at Dartmouth.
Fantastic. It's great to see you. And yes, your second home at Dartmouth.
Not in a literal.
Not in the literal sense, because right now you don't have to tell us your street address exactly and buzzer number, but whereabouts in the city are you coming to us from?
I am in Hell's Kitchen.
Seat of the theater district. So wonderful. And Jim, listen, you'll notice, so as we were setting up for today, I realized that actually one of the last performances that I saw in a theater was Hadestown, the Broadway version of the show. And because my mother, with whom I saw the show, is a great making sure, she always makes sure that I get the program. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if I still have that program from February. And here it is.
Yay.
So thank you for Hadestown. I enjoyed it so much.
It was a special journey, that one.
I can imagine. And it has more ties to the Dartmouth and Upper Valley area, actually, because Anais Mitchell, who resides up here, is from there.
Yes. Her parents, I think they teach at Middlebury. So she grew up in Vermont. And while we were working the 3 weeks that we were residents with Hadestown, she was going back and forth from Vermont to New Hampshire, back and forth across the river.
Very cool. Such a beautiful, special piece that is.
Well, yeah, and it really was first conceived as a community concert for little towns in Vermont, and a mix of community performers and musicians. So first took life in that way in Vermont.
Okay, so listen, because Rachel Shavkin was actually our inaugural guest for Hop to Broadway, I did learn that it started with the idea of a theater piece in mind, but I didn't realize, well, now I'm curious to know, when did it sort of take hold and there was an idea like, oh, this could go all the way?
From those early community town halls in Vermont, a recording was made that was with some rather amazing, well-known musicians, and it kind of made an impact in the world. And that's when we started to pay attention, because that's how we found it. So it was that jump from town hall to recording.
Great. It sounds very organic,
Yeah.
actually, which is so perfect. Listen, Todd, our production manager, is telling me that I need to center my camera, so we're going to lose a little bit of Hadestown, but you're going to get more.
Yay!
More of this.
Yes.
Okay. So listen, Jim, the first thing that I would love to know from you, if you don't mind talking about it, is this is always fascinating to me to talk with theater artists about how they came to be here. And I mean, you're there in Hell's Kitchen, very successful director, artistic director. Can you tell us something about your path to arrive here?
Sure. Well, I grew up in New England, so it feels very much like the place that I'm from to this very day, outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And this is the 50s, and I was a little gay boy in very classic Leave It to Beaver kind of America. And I really didn't know how I was going to have a life, because it didn't seem possible for me in the options presented. You know, not in a literal sense, but what I observed. Well, where am I? What am I going to do here? I don't fit. And my parents, who were very kind and loving, but were, you know, anxious, were encouraging me to do things like Boy Scouts and Little League and all those things to butch me up. And very clear memory is when I was 10 or 11, there was a notice in the local newspaper that the Little Theatre of Manchester, the town I grew up in, was starting a children's wing. And when I saw that, I just said, that's where I go and that's where I belong. And for sure, that's what happened. When I went there, I found a life, and I found the possibility of a life. And ever since then, I think my favorite place to be is sitting in a theater seat, watching a performance with other people around me. That's really sort of the lens that I've experienced the entire world, all of history, through that strange ritual of reenactment and observing and participating in that way.
Thank you. And Jim, also, like, what strikes me about the beginning of your story is that it sounds almost like you knew what needed to happen to get yourself to the Little Theater. Even before you quite knew what it was. You seem to have a very strong, like, I'm going to go there to figure it out.
Well, yeah, that's interesting that you point that out, because I do think of, when I look back over the journey of my life, there have been things that have presented themselves to me from the outside world, and I've said, that thing, that's it. Particularly, that was true about the invitation to come and interview for the job at New York Theatre Workshop. I was in DC at a wonderful theater of the Arena Stage, and I got a call to come, and I had not really been thinking about being an artistic director. I was mostly a director and a staff member, a producer kind of guy. But something about when I heard that call, I said, this is it. And I think by that point, I'd already sort of identified and seen some of the work of this theater and felt like this is a theater that really interests me. And then as soon as I sort of identified that, to get that call, I just felt like this, you know, there's something from whatever there might be of divinity in action here. So pay attention.
Great. We have to be sensitive to what's around us.
Absolutely.
To take those opportunities.
Yep.
This idea, though, that you didn't have a preconceived idea, like, oh, I see my path heading toward artistic directorship of a theater. You then get the job, and you arrive. Was there any moment? I mean, we're talking about, like, now you've been there and, you know, established your voice within that organization for a while. But have there been any times where you're like, no way, I should have not given, I should have stuck with directing theater?
Well, honestly, I would say very few moments of that. There are, of course, the dark moments of, including the one we're living through now, where one has to question But I think I was, one of the great good fortunes of my life is that I was put into a situation that allowed me to keep experimenting and try new things. If you speak to any artistic director on the planet, well, particularly this country, let's say, there's no course you can go and get an MFA in artistic leadership. You can get an MFA in directing, playwriting, acting, design, administration, but nothing about artistic leadership, which means that everyone who starts down this road makes it up for themselves. And it's trial and error the whole way. I have often compared it to writing a play. That it's just been going on for 32 years. I'm writing this play that I'm also performing in. I think a surprise to me has been, early-ish on, was like a lot of people think, oh, an artistic leader is a gatekeeper. And there's a perception of it simply as in a power dynamic. You have the yes or the no. And another element of childhood was, according to family legend, I don't remember this, but at 4 or 5 years old, we were raised in the New England version of the Baptist Church, which is probably more like Quakerism, not the southern Baptist kind of thing. But I think I articulated that I wanted to be a minister when I grew up. And that landed on me somewhere like, I must have been in my early 40s, that thing that I talked about unconsciously at 4 or 5 years old, in essence has happened, except in a secular frame. And that what I'm doing is making a place where the artists are really the preacher. I'm not. I'm just the facilitator of an ongoing conversation. So that surprised me. And of course, the minute I realized I was surprised by it, I thought, well, why would you be surprised at that? Of course, that's what it is. It's the stewardship of an ongoing conversation.
It sounds like you've been very thoughtful and reflective over the time of what your role is, which seems powerful for what you can continue to do.
I tried. Not always succeeded, but I've tried. And the world doesn't have any problem letting you know when you are not doing what is expected.
Well, in the 40th anniversary introduction, the video there, something that struck me. I'm sorry, one of the artists mentioned, "Oh, I was worried I might not be." Maybe she used the word risky enough for New York Theater Workshop, and that seems like a huge compliment to you. To this idea, like, okay, this is where things can happen that are not safe. And I don't mean not safe in a way that we're going to physically injure ourselves, but not safe in a way that we're not going to stick to this way of sticking to how it's always done.
Well, the critic Helen Shaw, who now is working at Vulture, New York Magazine, I'm not going to be able to remember this exactly, but she said something that's really made an impression, which is there is no more dangerous place to be and safe place to be than in a theater seat. So that it's saying that you go on incredible, dangerous adventures in your theater seat without actually risking life and limb, but you're stretching your mind and your soul. And I think that's true. I think one of the areas that we are pretty self-critical of often is that we take ourselves too seriously in our the conversation that we're having, that the world seems so overwhelming and so full of problems and things and issues and trauma and pain that have to be addressed, that we often feel like you can't have a conversation that's just doom and gloom. You have to have joy and humor and release. So as we're in our season planning process, we're often, the artistic staff and I, but where's the fun factor? And we always, it almost seems every year that we have to go looking for that, for those projects and those artists that have that kind of voice, because people tend to think of us as, a serious, dark, probing theater. And I'm happy with that. I'll go with that. But we also need to have some lightness of spirit as well.
That's fabulously put, Jim. Thank you so much. And actually, just with this idea of you in a theater seat, feeling both in a dangerous place and a safe place, Todd, I wonder if we could bring up the photo of Jim. It's photo number 3, I believe, of Jim in the 4th Street Theater.
Many years ago.
Thank you. Well, you were noting that the upholstery on those seats is not the current,
right?
Not how it currently is. It was renovated.
Those the theater was created out of a warehouse that was for repairing garbage trucks in 1969, and when they bought some old movie palace seats to fill it out, they found it was right after the Metropolitan Opera had moved to its new theater at Lincoln Center, and Rudolph Bing, who was the impresario, had commissioned a particular fabric, which was red with gold threads through it. And when he saw it, he rejected it and said it wasn't the right thing. So this fabric was sitting around looking for a new home. So these old movie palace theaters were covered with this reject from the Metropolitan Opera. And I loved the interplay of radio seats in a exposed brick space with these golden threaded fabric coverings on the chairs. That interplay of splendor and poverty, or splendor and practicality, seemed very theatrical and in a subtle way in the space. So they did finally, a few years ago, that fabric wore out. We just had to recover them. So now they're recovered.
Well, it wore out because you did so many great shows and everybody came to see them.
They did that fabric did many decades of good service.
I have to tell you, in asking the question about the upholstery, I didn't know that there might be a real story there. And
yep.
You delivered beautifully. Thank you. Listen, in talking also about what theater can do, what it can make us feel, suspense, not knowing what's going to happen next, but also feeling comfortable and safe. We've acknowledged a few times already in this talk that, we're living in the time of COVID-19. We're living in the time of racial injustice. And I know that on both of those topics, you in the theater continue to be active. And maybe we'll just to put something into context, Todd, can we bring up the Zoom? Great, thank you. That's some of what's happening right now with New York Theater Workshop, correct?
That is life daily now. And much of it takes place on Zoom.
Including with actors, with creative artists.
Oh, yes. We've been doing, in the immediate aftermath after the abrupt shutdown in March. So April, May, June, we did some fairly simple, I think we did 30 different events online that were largely conversations, sharings with artists and so forth. But the season coming up, which we had no idea what was going to transpire. Would we be back in the space? Would we not? And after much conversation amongst many members of our community, we have a habit of listening in all different corners to artists, to board members, staff. We came up with this idea of creating a community of artists called the Artistic Instigators. And we picked a number of 25 of them. And essentially what we said is we will give you a grant of $2,500, which was to some extent trying to just acknowledged that they were out of work and they had no money, and we had something we could give them. It wasn't a lot, but something. And that was just for them to dream. And then we sent them a statement of provocation saying, we don't know what's going to happen next year. It's unlikely we will be able to gather as we usually have, but there's all kinds of ways, with technology. We could be in an outdoor situation. Think about that, create. We'll give you a couple of months and we'll come back to you and we'll start figuring out what that might be. Then our marketing team had to figure out, well, how do we connect to an audience with that? And in our previous way of being, the organization is called New York Theater Workshop. And when I first got there in 1988, one of the big questions was, what is a theater workshop? And people on the board and the conversations I had with them felt that was confused in the public-facing part of us, that a New York Times critic would come and review a director's project after 2 weeks of rehearsal. And of course, after 2 weeks of rehearsal, what's going to get a good review? Not. Or we were in a rented space and we would, whatever success we might have would be attributed to the Perry Street Theater, not to us. So this identity thing was an issue. And it felt to me like the thing to straighten out is, what is a theater workshop? So the formulation I came up with early on was, we are both of those things. They're two separate things. In the landscape of 1979, when the theater was conceived, which was well before me, there were producing organizations across the country, and then there were support for artists like the O'Neill and New Dramatists, so forth, like that, workshop-y kinds of things. Yeah. But rarely did the two live in one institution. And that was the first idea, is put those things together. And the second big idea, maybe the most revolutionary idea, was that the American theater has always been, as most English language theaters are, it's a literary space. A play has as much value sitting on a library shelf and being read on the page as it does being performed, as we all know from the Shakespeare classes we had to sit through in high school. And what the smartness of the founders was to say, it is a performance, and that it only lives in performance. Therefore, it can't just be about the playwright, who was the playwright. The role of the playwright was privileged in the practice of American not-for-profit theater. In 1979, this organization said the director is just as important, and we're going to take two of those people and put them at the center. So that's part of what drew me to this theater in the first place. So anyway, cut to my arrival, trying to figure out the identity issues, and it seemed to me we wanted to separate those, to be clear in the public eye when we're doing theater, which is where we define that as where we privilege the needs of an audience to come and be nurtured and tended to, and it's their conversation with the artists, and their needs are first, a priority. On the workshop side, the first priority is the needs of the artists to dream, to function, to fail, to try an idea and realize, no, that's not going to work, but that's a really good thing I learned. There can be participation of the public in that, but we always try to make it clear to the public, you're here not for your process, you're here for their process. So that has been our sort of rule of thumb since. And we've always, in trying to construct a relationship with public, to get people to belong and be a part of the ongoing conversation, we've sold a 5-play season, and we've described plays and plots and artists involved, but the thing is, it's been about the thing. And what we realized going into this unknown moment, that we had to adjust. Nothing of the old assumptions was going to stand. And it's suddenly, I got very excited about the idea that we would break that form that we'd been working with, and that what we would sell to the membership is a relationship to an artist and their process. And I think in New York, there's a lot of people that are very interested in the process. So we devised a membership, which is more like a Netflix kind of thing, $10 a month for a year. And we guarantee a couple of things a month that might be that are probably going to be streamed. if we do, towards the end, get to produce, they will get a ticket as part of that. But it's really about, and they will have a time over that year to check in with these 25 projects by these instigators, like what's going to happen. So coming up at Dartmouth this summer is the remnants of an online virtual New York Theater Workshop residency with 2 significant projects that are instigator projects. So you will soon see those.
Fantastic. Wow, I look forward to that, and I hope that all of the people joining us today will also tune in to what that is. And listen, Jim, that's actually kind of a really great organic segue to bring us into what you are doing at Dartmouth this year. And I'd like to invite another guest to join us. This is a recent grad, Sam West, 20.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi. I'm so excited to be here and get to talk to you all.
It's really nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Sam, I wonder if you might be able to talk a little bit about your experience. So maybe I should put this also into context. Part of the residency of New York Theater Workshop also involves student interaction. Yeah, there's a class around it. And Sam, you took this class, I want to say 2018, is that true?
Yes,
okay.
That's it.
And you know what? Yes. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what you worked on, what your experience was?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was interesting how Jim was saying, it's this place being about, the relationship to the artist and the process. And what was fun is that through this class in the summer, we got to be students of that energy and that process. And so, so they come up to us for 3 weeks, and there's 2 workshops that occur each week for a total of 6 different shows. It's usually a solo show and an ensemble show, like paired together. And so we as students, we get assigned to the shows in various capacities. I got to function in a kind of a stage managerial role for another, and then kind of assistant director for another one. Working on specific shows. My specific shows was one of the first ones was Americana Psychobabble by Alex Datarsky, which was fun. And I started kind of stage manager stuff and just kind of observing the process in that way. And then we got to be inserted a little bit into the actual performance in front of everyone. So that was the first thing that I was a part of. And I was also involved in, it was untitled at the time, but what became Is This a Room? That was directed by Tina Satter. And that was really fun and interesting to work on, and witness that process, because I don't know if I'll say I haven't seen what it became later on, but we know when it was first happening, that show, we didn't get it. And we didn't really understand what it was about. And yeah, it was just confusing, but it was just interesting, that process, because I hear so many things and how it changed later on in the process.
Sam, maybe it's important to note, so Is This a Room is one of the many shows from New York Theater Workshop that has gone on from its experimental period to have a very robust life. It's won a number of awards. Quite recently, it's toured the world. And it's just that's so cool that part of the involvement of students is that you get to participate in something that it's not that what happens in an institution like Dartmouth lives only there. You know what I mean? These are our lives. We are making the work that we are going to make, whether we are 21 or whether we have graduated and are, participating in professional theater.
Well, I would also just jump in here to say that we've been at Dartmouth for 28 summers. And
29. This is your 29th.
God. What we hear consistently from the artists who come and work there is that it's not like any other process of development or workshopping that they've done, and that one of the key things that makes it distinctive is the engagement with the students. And I think what happens for an artist there is they're playing their role that by this point in their lives is pretty not conscious. They know it and they're playing it. But suddenly there's someone who doesn't know what this role is, who's watching, asking questions. And suddenly they're becoming much more aware and conscious of process and what they're doing. And that, aside from whatever benefit there is to the actual work at hand, I think the artists leave feeling, I am an artist. So much of my life in New York City, I feel like an entrepreneur or a business person, that I'm a little small business. And this is reminding me purely that I am an artist. So it's a really great program. It's the center of our lives artistically.
Yeah, that relationship was so special for all of us students as well. Like, because you get to witness and ask those questions. A world that, as a student, a poor college student, just occasionally getting to see some professional shows, you're not part of that process with professionals. And seeing it develop and how different artists work in a room together, and what they can make. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam, for talking about that. And you know what, now might be a moment, if you don't mind, we have a question from the chat in YouTube. This is from Frank and Jean Fahy, I hope we're pronouncing that correctly, in Upper Valley. You say there's no curriculum for artistic director. I think this is for Jim. So how would you define artistic director, and how did you form your vision of New York Theater Workshop? I think you've talked a little bit about that, but maybe you could expand on it if you don't mind.
Well, I do feel like it is, I think I have found, let me just say that, I can't speak for any other artistic director, but I have found that if I don't think of myself as being an artist, and that this job is an artistic enterprise or an artistic task, then I can't do it. I can do it, but I don't think it'll be as rich in the end. I think in the sorry about that. I hope you're not hearing that background noise.
That's okay. It's New York City.
A fire truck's going by. It evolves from moment to moment. That I was lucky enough before I landed here. I started here when I was 37. And up until then, I had been around many very exciting theaters. I was a college student in a London program, and I got a job at the Royal Court when I was 21. I came back. I worked at the New York Shakespeare Festival with Joe Papp for 5 years in the casting department. I got to be around Zelda Fichandler at Arena Stage for 8 years. So I was in the presence of people who were doing it. The interesting thing to me was that neither Joe or Zelda were particularly skilled, accomplished, or directors, although they both thought of themselves that way. And their genius was about making a space for artists and audience to meet. And that's where I think I really learned that that's the task, is making space for people to play the role that they play in what a complicated thing like a theatrical event is. And because there are no preconceived measures of excellence or non-excellence, except the very real ones of financial success or failure. You just keep going, and you keep listening, and you keep talking and adjust. I mean, I could go on about this, so I'll stop at that.
Theater arts, are fluid, and it sounds like you're really tapping into, what is possible because of the flexibility of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, may I ask you, here, we're hearing the story, a bit of the story of Jim and how his path has flowed so far. What kind of a path are you on right now? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm still figuring a few things out. I mean, one of the things I discovered a little bit through New York Theater Workshop, I got to sit down and talk to Erin Malkin, the literary director, and I just fell in love with dramaturgy and that aspect of things. And so that's something I'm like really looking forward to continuing and pursuing that. And I'll be working a little bit with the Hop, continuing on their commissioned opera, Ritual of Breath. And I'll be working on that with the team there, which I'm excited about. But I mean, immediate steps for myself, because, things are so uncertain in trying to enter, the working world of the arts at the moment as a recent graduate. The best piece of advice I've received, is that it's also a time to just make your own stuff with no one, dictating what you can and can't do, what your budget is. And so I've been, cooking up some of those own ideas in my head and talking to friends about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is in some ways an extraordinary time of opportunity. Figure it out, make it new. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Here, there's another question I'm seeing from the chat, and this is for students like Sam that have just graduated. What words of encouragement can you give to them during the current Broadway shutdown and life in a pandemic?
Oh my gosh. I'm like wondering, am I like best qualified? Because I need those words of encouragement. I mean, from, my years and years of wisdom, what I can say is, I think it's going to come back. When the plague was going on in England back in the day, like it came back. And it's going to be different. The world undoubtedly is going to look different. And it's hard looking back, hard to reflect on this moment, and reflect on history, because we are living history right now, with not just COVID, but all of the reckoning that's been happening in the world. And so I can, I think, taking this time for yourself, but also being a creative in this moment, like I said, like working on whatever own projects you've got, taking into consideration this moment, because all of that is going to be so necessary and vital to what is to come, whatever that may be.
Sam, like beautifully said, wise words. And as you were talking, I saw in my chat, it came up, that question actually, you were saying, I'd like to know the answer to that question. And that actually was for Jim. What advice would you give? But Sam, I have to tell you, you spoke from such like a place of listening and really reasoning through what might be important to know about this right now. And I thought that was a great answer.
Thank
really
you.
Inspiring. Thank you. Jim, same question. What words of encouragement or advice might you have for students?
I loved what Sam had to say. I'm at a different place in life's journey. And sometimes I'm feeling quite pessimistic and terrified and as messed up as the world is, I'm still aware that change can mean loss and disaster, as well as opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about the year 1920, which is going back to the pandemic of influenza and the end of World War I. And that is, you can look at that as the end of the 19th century and the birth of the 20th. And I think we're in that same moment that lots is being challenged and lots is going to be tossed out and a lot is going to emerge. And the thing to stay focused on is the optimism of that change is coming. You're going to play a role in what emerges for the 21st century theater, and that you always have to keep your eye on, you have to keep centered on who you are and what you bring to a conversation in a larger sense, to the larger community. And then you need to figure out, in the given circumstances as they're evolving, what's the place where I can put what I have to offer to use, to work, and look for those opportunities, because they're going to emerge. We're not there yet, but everything is up in the air. So it is a moment of rebirth and transformation, for sure. That's what, and I think that's something that every human being, whatever stage they're at in their lives, has to come to terms with where we are now. We're all, in some ways, it's a great leveling moment. We're all in the boat, in the same kind of uncertain boat together.
Thank you.
Yeah. That has me thinking, I've been thinking a lot about like intergenerational relationships, and that uncertainty is like really uniting, I think, across the generations.
Well, and this is a culture, in my experience up till now, has really worked hard and really prized separating generations, isolating them from each other. And I think this is a moment where that can't be. That's going to go away. And I think that's healthy. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Jim, you were also talking for a moment ago about using what you have to sort of speak to the moment. And, also, with this idea of, Sam, you bring up the reckoning that's happening right now. And this idea that, yes, there is an equalization of us all having to deal with the virus doesn't care.
Right.
I mean, the virus doesn't care. But it is affecting some people disproportionately, of course. And you were telling me about an extraordinary thing that you and your theater have done, listening to the moment. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that, this idea of helping people who are protesting during this time, and how,
Well, in those first frenetic moments after the tragedy and horror that we all experienced with George Floyd's death, and every city was erupting, there was an impulse from within the workshop staff, really, community, that we should play some role as an institution. And what was conceived was that we actually have a building with a lobby that's empty now, and our location is kind of well suited to being in the midst of much of the protesting that's going on. So we started opening our lobby, and we started putting that out there, where we were a safe space for people that were participating. And we offered water. We opened our bathrooms. We also made it clear that we would not allow police to come into our lobby, that it was safe for that. And it was just a place for people to replenish before they went back out. And this turned into a whole movement all over the city first, and then across the country. Open your lobby was the campaign. And it was great. It was really great. And it was a decision we came to. I was skeptical at the beginning. But this is why I love the place that I work at, is that we all talk about these things and we change each other's minds and we come to things together collectively. So that was our thing. And then that's kind of slowed down now, but we're in the midst of other issues and things and opportunities and efforts.
Thank you for telling us about that. Very cool. Thank you. Jim, listen, it's 8:51. Sam, it's 8:51. We're nearing sort of the finish line here. But I wonder if each of you, if there's something that I haven't yet asked for each of you, is there some parting words that you would like to give us? And if not, that's fine too. Maybe we'll start with Sam.
Oh gosh. Okay. I mean, thinking about this relationship of New York Theater Workshop with Dartmouth. I mean, all I can say is just how exciting and meaningful it was for us students. One of my favorite parts was at the end of each week. At the end of each performance week, we all gather in Occam Commons and go through like a Liz Lerman critical response theory and examine the work that we just saw in a way that is beneficial for, the artist and director. And that was my first introduction to that process, which love it. It was so fun. And just getting to think critically about art and discuss that with other artists was a ton of fun. And I also, walked away with it, just being able to connect with other young professionals, which was a really exciting part of it. I feel like I'm turning into an advertisement for this for this class. But so one of the shows was a musical, We Live in Cairo, that was workshopped while I was taking this class. Written by Daniel and Patrick Lazar and directed by Taby Magar. And me and my friends went to go see it because it was being produced at ART the following spring. And so we connected with those artists all over again and caught up with them and got to discuss the work and how it changed and all of that. And then I also ran into another artist. I'm talking for a long time, I'm sorry. Another artist, Jeremy O'Harris, who was a resident artist. There, I ran into him in New York and after another play of his that I saw, and he remembered me from this class. And so just, a really meaningful, bringing together people from, so many different levels of experience. And so much to offer each other. It's such a mutual relationship.
The performing arts world is a very small world, and we keep running into each other and collaborating with each other and being each other's employees and bosses, and it's quite lovely in a lot of ways, I mean, sometimes it's really rough and challenging also, but there is beauty to be had. Jim, is there anything that I have not asked or that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I would like to just talk about how special I think this relationship is between Dartmouth Hopkins Center Theater Department and New York Theater Workshop. I don't think there's another relationship that I'm aware of that exists like this. I'm aware of some relationship between a theater company, a professional theater company, and a graduate level or a conservatory kind of thing. But to have a relationship between a producing theater and the artists that inhabit it, and liberal arts students at a really rich moment in their lives of figuring out who and what am I and where am I going and what am I doing. To have this opportunity is unique and powerful, I think, and beneficial on both sides of that equation. Like I said earlier, I think artists really enjoy and relish and find meaning in connecting with the students. So I am always grateful to Dartmouth's commitment to us and the vision that Dartmouth has to understand how special this is and to sustain it for 29 years.
Right.
That's remarkable. There was a moment. I don't want to take up too much time. Are we okay?
We're okay. We can go to 1 hour and 1 minute.
Oh,
it's perfect.
Well, those of you that know the Dartmouth campus, down on the waterfront. This is early on, one of the first, second, third years that we were there. And I was standing on the dock, and I saw a canoe float by. And in this canoe was Joanna Colitis, Anne Bogart, and in between them, a very young Lisa Peterson. So 3 amazing women who were directors. Anne and Joanne well along into their careers, Lisa at the very beginning of hers. And I could see this intense conversation happening amongst them. I couldn't hear it because I was too far away. But I thought this maybe is the most important thing that happens here at Dartmouth, is the connections and the exchange of experience, and the wisdom of what it is to be an artist being passed along to a younger artist. So yeah, I do feel it. People leave, the artists leave Dartmouth feeling reminded of their calling in a higher sense, and have kind of let go of all of the, I got to go to this audition, or I got to, all of that stuff has been left behind. We also make sure that in that process of a week, we have a day off where we all go on a field trip together. So to replicate what happened in that canoe, so that we go sit under a waterfall and we see in an informal way that kind of exchange of artists. And in some, you can really see the difference in the work before the field trip and after the field trip. Absolutely.
Todd, are you able to bring up the second photo? It's a bunch of people on a field trip. I know I'm throwing you a curveball. Yes. Yeah. There's one of the field trips. And if you can all look up to the gentleman standing in the jeans with the blue shirt, that's Dan Kotlowitz, the chair of the Department of Theater. And this is probably from, well, I don't know, what time period?
Well,
90s?
I'm much younger, so a long time ago.
Thanks, Todd.
I love that photo.
It's really great. Thank you. Well, listen, our time has come to a close. Thank you both so much. You've been really, really wonderful guests. I appreciate your getting involved with us and sharing your insights and your experience with us. It's really important and valuable. Thank you. If you can just hang out in the room for one more moment, I'm just going to thank a few people. So as I might be repeating myself from some who have been in a Hop to Broadway or the DTH program we did a while ago, but I just want to emphasize, all that is happening right now, it's because of a group of people. The Hopkins Center for the Performing Arts is a group of people, a wonderful group of people that all make this happen. And I'd like to thank Mary Lou Oleski and Joshua Cole and Karina Sines, whose name I got wrong last time, Sines, Keely Ayers and Todd Campbell and Dave Haggerty and the entire staff at the Hop. And I want to thank Dan Kotlowitz and the staff in the Department of Theater. And you know what? Just because I have a little airtime, I'm going to thank my mom and dad who introduced me to theater. And one of the reasons I'm here is because I had an upbringing that favored that. So thank you. And Sam and Jim, thank you both so much.
Of course.
Jim, this is now it's kind of a non sequitur. I can't find a way to exactly connect this, but it is about current times, I guess, and social media. New York Theater Workshop had sent this very wonderful video created by 2 of your artistic instigators, Martha Redbone and Erin Whidbey.
Yes.
And I wonder if you might just put into context what we're about to see as our sort of closing video.
Great. Well, this is an instigation of the Goethe Institute, which is the global German cultural effort. And they often will, in all of the places that they have offices and they're all over the world, they will say, we're going to do something and here's some money, commission local artists. So this was a project that was in theater, and it was about privacy and the growing threat to privacy in the social media world, in the online world. And the idea was that a place like New York Theater Workshop would be given a sum of money. We would commission a 5 or 10 minute play from an artist then they would accumulate a big group of these plays, and then our obligation, each participant would do one evening, which we would take some of those plays and make an evening. So our contribution was to go to Martha and Aaron and say a 5-minute play can be a song. So we commissioned them to do a song on this subject, and we collaborated with the Celia Cruz High School in the Bronx to make this what you're about to see.
Thank you.
We wanted to talk to you guys and get a kind of perspective on what you think about privacy in this digital age of social media.
What happens today will really kind of shape what happens this piece. So you guys are really involved in the making of this thing.
We decided to make this song called Stars because we're saying, yeah, we're giving everything away. We're giving all our privacy away so that we can all be stars, you know.
Social media is great if you're trying to put yourself out there.
Everything about you. You can see it about other people. There might be some things that's none of their business, you know, that you don't want out there. But it's about how do we control that. Okay, you guys ready?
There's nothing left. Night after night with the snapshots, selfies, checking and checking out. Who's watching me? Who's watching you? We do have a choice and a vote.
Thank you and good night. Thank you for joining us.
Happy talking, talking, happy talk. Talk about things you'd like to do. You've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true? Happy talking, talking, happy talk. Talk about things you'd like to do. You've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true? Let's talk about the moon, floating in the sky, looking like a lily on a lake. Talk about the bird, learning how to fly, making all the music he can make. Hey, happy talking, talking, happy talk. Talk about things you'd like to do. You've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna have a dream come true?